Most anglers guess about what works. For 10 years, I got to test it. 2 clients in my boat, slightly different flies on each rig, and I'd watch which one caught more fish. After hundreds of days of doing that, here are the 3 things I learned about big brown trout that most anglers don't know. The first thing that testing taught me is that the small details of your flies matter, way more than most anglers realize. And I mean small. Not fly pattern, but the tiny variations between the same pattern. Perfect example, the Pat's rubber legs. I started noticing after many days on the water that the ones tied with a slightly thinner body completely outfish the ones tied with a thicker body. Same color, same legs, same hook, just one tied slightly thinner. Once I noticed this, I started digging through the bins at fly shops and picking out only the ones with a thinner profile, and my hookups, especially with the bigger fish, went up significantly. Even better example. One time a manufacturer messed up a batch of zertles. Wrong body color, wrong legs, just a straight up mistie. That fly absolutely crushed the big brown trout in my local river. Way better than the normal color scheme. The problem was they weren't making any more of them. So I started using a Sharpie and coloring in my zertles to match that color profile of the mistie, and it kept working. That's how specific this stuff can get. Here's the point. The fish, especially the bigger fish, are noticing the small details that we think are trivial. The body thickness, the leg color, the bead color. It all makes a difference. The things you think wouldn't matter, they matter. One thing I do now is every time I catch a bigger fish on a fly, I take out my phone and I take a quick photo of the fly that fish was caught on. This helps me compare flies and notice those small details that matter, and helps me select flies in the future. And yeah, fish do random stuff. One fly beating another for a couple hours doesn't mean much. But when you've watched a slight variation outfish the other day after day, the pattern starts to emerge.
Yeah? Nice. Oh, okay.
So the takeaway, pay attention to the small stuff, the body thickness, the bead color, the specific tie. The difference between an okay fly and a great fly is usually smaller than you think. So take a photo every time you catch a big fish on your phone of the fly you were using. The second thing is about the big fly, small fly combo and how it actually works. Rig up a big attractor fly with a small nymph behind it. The big fly pulls those bigger fish in, even if they're only eating that small nymph behind it. Here's how I figured this out. I'd have 2 clients in my boat, both catching fish on the same small nymph. One rig was 2 small nymphs, the other rig was a bigger fly with the same small nymph behind it. Same water, same day, same nymphs on both rods. But over and over, the rig with the big fly caught more big brown trout than the rig with the 2 small nymphs. The same nymph doing the catching, but the big fly changed which fish were showing up. Big browns prefer different food from the rest of the trout. They want the rockworms, the sculpin, the crawfish, and the other small bait fish. The big fly is what pulls them out of their spot to investigate. Once they move over, they often eat the smaller nymph as it drifts by. But without the big fly, those bigger browns never come out to look. The nymph catches the fish, the big fly determines which fish come over to look at it. For the big attractor flies, I like stuff like the Pat's rubber legs, little sculpin patterns, zertles for crawfish, sparkle minnows, anything big that's gonna get attention and matches the food source that those big browns are keying in on your specific river. Pick something that matches the biggest food source in your river. Even when the big fly doesn't get eaten, it's earning its spot. It's the reason that bigger fish showed up. The third thing took me the longest to figure out, and honestly, it was the hardest habit to break. Once a fly is working, don't change it, even if the fishing slows down. When I first started guiding, I'd get stressed when the fishing slowed down. You could feel the clients getting anxious. You know that quiet part where everyone in the boat is wondering why we're not catching fish anymore? And I felt like I needed to do something. I felt like changing flies was doing something. So I'd change them every time, but that was a huge mistake. It took me a while to realize that I was making it worse. Because when the fishing slowed down, a lot of times it wasn't the flies, it was actually just the water. There are just sections of the river with fewer fish, the dead zones, and every river has them. Here's what I noticed floating the same rivers over and over. Fish aren't evenly distributed. There are hot zones where they're actively feeding, and then there's dead zones where there just aren't as many fish. If you change flies during a dead zone, you arrive at the next hot zone with a fly that hasn't been tested that day. Meanwhile, the fly that you caught a nice fish on earlier in the day, now it's just sitting in your box. So the rule I follow now is if a fly puts a decent fish in the boat, I ride it. Don't second guess it during a slow stretch of the river. The dead water always ends, the next hot zone is coming, and when you get there, you want to have the fly that was working on your rig. This is way harder than it sounds. When the boat's quiet, because no one's catching fish, there's always an instinct to change something. Fly, the depth, spot, anything. But most of the time, changing your flies is the worst thing you can do. Just keep drifting, the fish are coming. The best guide days I ever had weren't the ones where I made a bunch of great fly changes. They were the ones where I trusted the flies that I knew caught big fish, rode them through the slow sections, and had them on during the good sections. So, pay attention to the small details of your flies. The bead, the profile, the way it's tied. If it works for you and catches a big fish, take a photo of that fly so you have something to reference. Rig a big attractor fly with a small nymph behind it. The big fly pulls in those big browns, but most of the time they're gonna eat that small nymph that's behind. And when a fly is working, trust it through the slow sections and ride it through the good ones. Do those three things and you'll start catching the types of brown trout that most anglers only see in other people's photos. If this helped, I'm posting weekly videos about what the last 10 years of guiding actually taught me. We'll see you in the next one.